because Blink is also partially about decision making, I was rereading Blink this week, and your book is, all your books are a bit like Farsighted and a couple of my other ones in that they draw upon all these different stories from all these different places at different time periods, different fields. And I always wonder when I read your stuff, like how do you find all those things? Like that process of assimilating all those different stories is really, I find that to be the toughest thing about writing a book like that. But you seem to do it, incredibly well. Do you have a technique for that?
I don't think so. I don't have techniques. I remember years ago in conversation with you, you described this process of note gathering that you just described now. Now it's much more advanced. It wasn't 100,000 words back then, but this was a long time ago. And I remember just being amazed at this process you had, because I don't have a process. I sometimes will scribble notes to myself, and then I don't. And I'll email them to myself, and I put them in a file called Ideas, and then I go back and I look at them, and I rarely write enough to be able to decipher it a month later. So I don't know what that means. I ran across one recently that was like, it had lots of exclamation points, so clearly it seemed exciting at the time, but it was gibberish. So I don't have a system, but but what I find is that generally speaking, well, I'm very iterative as well. I mean, I circle back and over and over and over and over the same stories because there's always way more depth to them than. I mean, my operating assumption when I'm writing about something is that, and it sounds obnoxious, but it's true, that almost everyone who's written about this before didn't do a good job. So pick a famous court case, read the popular press on that court case, and in 98% of the cases, you'll discover that the people who wrote about it didn't actually either attend the trial, read the transcript of the trial, interview anyone else. I mean, people are lazy.
Right.
So as long as once you realize people are lazy, you don't have to have any great magical story finding abilities. You just have to read the transcript.
The other thing, right. The other thing that I think that you do and that I try to do, I often find when I'm interviewing people and they're for whatever field they're in, they're at the top of their field, they're a surgeon, a neuroscientist, or a lawyer, or whoever they are, and they've done something interesting that you want to write about. The fascinating thing about those conversations is that those people often don't realize the most interesting thing in their work, or the thing that will be most interesting to a lay reader, an ordinary reader, right? Because they're working at the very edges of their field, and they're working on all these new problems that haven't been solved yet. But the problem that was solved 4 or 5 years ago that's incredibly boring to them, that everyone in their field knows, you're like, wait, you buried the lead. There was an incredible nugget of information there. And it's that weird process of listening to someone talk who's an expert in something and kind of ignoring what they think is interesting and finding that little extra bit and figuring a way to convey that to an audience. That's a fun part of it. And that's something you have to
I was doing, from the podcast Broken Record, music podcast that I started with a bunch of people, among them Rick Rubin. And in the first episode, I'm interviewing Rick Rubin. And Rick Rubin was the DJ for the Beastie Boys in their inaugural tour when he was still at NYU. And he was telling the story of that first tour. And they, on that tour, opened for Madonna. And at the time, Madonna was in her sort of bubblegum phase. She was not the kind of edgy, her audience was 12-year-old girls and their moms, right? And so it's like, wait a minute, Rick, the Beastie Boys opened for Madonna. So you would be in some concert hall, and the Beastie Boys are doing their thing, and they're all like 18 years old. And there's a bunch of 12-year-old girls with their moms. What was their reaction? And it's like clearly he hadn't thought about it for 30 years. And so many weird things happen in the life of someone like that he is no longer classified that as strange. Whereas to me, that is deeply hilarious. And then I was like, well, so he's like, yeah, everyone just kind of looked at them with their mouths open. I was like, well, did you hang out with Madonna afterwards? He goes, oh yeah, we all went. It's like the visual of the 23-year-old Madonna chewing gum with the Beastie Boys and, long bearded Rick Rubin. It's just so fantastic. But he had no, it was his life.
Right.
It wasn't, he didn't find that, and that is, I agree totally. That's the magical thing about interviewing people is that the looking at their life through a different lens.
Right.